Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Stalkers, True Tales of Deadly Obsessions by Eileen Ormsby, narrated by Romy Nordlinger. Introduction. Stalk. Verb. 1. To pursue. Game, a person, etc., stealthily. 2. To proceed through an area in search of prey or quarry. Stalker. 1. A person who stalks. A young woman shares a friendly kiss with a fellow student at a New Year's Eve party. Another realizes that a new online friend has been liking and commenting on social media posts from years ago. Both incidents sound benign, but both turned into nightmares that lasted years, culminating in violent attacks. Stalking is an insidious crime. It can be difficult to define, and even more, difficult to prove. Many people put up with unwanted attention from would-be suitors whose feelings they do not return, and it's not always clear when the line between enthusiastic pursuit and illegal stalking has been crossed. Around 1 in 10 people report having been stalked at some point in their lives, with women more likely than men to be victims. However, the types of behaviors that can comprise stalking can range from slightly creepy to downright violent. It often starts benignly and grows, almost imperceptibly, into something terrifying. That terror made stalking a popular subject for psychological thriller and suspense movies. Done well, a good stalker thriller will elicit heightened feelings of fear, suspense, anticipation, and anxiety, even if the actions of the stalker are seemingly harmless. If we sense a malevolence about a character, their mere presence at the end of the street, standing in a doorway, or talking to another character can put us on edge as we wait for the inevitable violence to occur. It is interesting that the stalkers in films are just as often, perhaps more often, women as men, when the statistics tell us that men are more likely to be stalkers, and their stalking is more likely to escalate into a violent act. The term bunny boiler came out of one of the most famous stalking movies of all time, Fatal Attraction. Audiences held their breath as Alex Forrest, played by Glenn Close, became unhinged, spiraling into increasingly desperate attempts to get Dan Gallagher, Michael Douglas, to notice her, leading to the infamous scene in which he kills and cooks his daughter's pet rabbit and leaves it on the family stove. Ironically, after that movie, a woman called Dawnette Knight became infatuated with Michael Douglas and believed they were in a relationship, despite the two never having met. She allegedly threatened to slice up his wife, Catherine Zeta-Jones, and feed her to her dog. More recently, there have been studies on how romantic comedies normalize stalking behavior. It is a common trope that the persistent suitor gets the girl at the end. Often, however, the way he goes about it would get him arrested in the real world. We see hapless teens or goofy, unlucky-in-love leading men pursue their love interest long after she has clearly and repeatedly told them no, sometimes even resorting to lying, manipulation, break and enter, or blackmail to win her back. These films send mixed messages about what is and is not appropriate. In the real world, those tactics are more likely to result in a prison sentence than to win a girl's heart. Whilst most young men trying to navigate the world of love and sex know how to separate fantasy and reality, it is no wonder some of them get confused. Although a stalker's actions may be causing fear, stress, confusion, and anger, it can often be difficult to determine exactly where behavior crosses the line and becomes actionable harassment. The stalker's presence might be explained away as a coincidence, a gift as a harmless, friendly gesture, a silent phone call as an accidental misdial. Because the behavior starts out as normal, a victim usually won't think to collect evidence or make note of dates and times until a definite and provable line has been crossed. Stating the allegations out loud can seem trivial on their own and might not convey the terror the victim felt. Celebrity stalkers. Stalking as a crime is a relatively new construct. It is only in the past few decades that countries have begun to enact specific anti-stalking laws. Before that, stalking had to fall into other categories of criminal behavior before anything could be done about it. Acts like kidnapping, assault, or killing the victim's pets were clearly against the law. But persistent following, calling, messaging, and sending gifts were not. It was the case of young Hollywood actress Rebecca Schaeffer, the first in this book, that kick-started a move to create the statutory offense of stalking. It was initially designed to protect celebrities and public figures. Their high profile often means that people they have never met feel like they know them or have a special connection with them. Hollywood publicity machines encourage a sense of pseudo-intimacy with stars, knowing that a devoted fandom brings in more viewers, merchandise sales, and ticket purchases. Actual violent attacks on celebrities are rare, but stalking has almost always been a prelude to the attack when they have occurred. When establishing the first Celebrity Threat Management Division of local law enforcement, researchers found that there were shared themes that have a significant presence in the stalking of celebrities and public figures. Pathological fixation, the development of an abnormal, highly focused, and all-encompassing interest in a person that comes to dominate the life of the stalker, leads them to believe they are entitled to a relationship with the person they are pursuing. This may be followed by a grievance due to a perceived slight, or the object of their affection not acting the way they should. The outcome is a serious violence aimed at a specific person and likely to have been planned in advance. Celebrity stalkings get the most attention as they are the most high-profile and, ironically, happen to people we feel we know to some degree. Celebrities are also most likely to become the target of obsessive fans who feel some sort of connection to them, or because their public face makes them seem to be friendly and accessible. Actress Sandra Bullock, famous for playing wholesome girl-next-door types, locked herself in a closet and called 911 when the obsessed fan and stalker Joshua Corbett broke into her home in 2014. Donald Trump's daughter, Ivanka, was subjected to 2 years of creepy emails and Twitter messages by Justin Massler. He sent her a picture of himself covered in blood and threatened to kill himself in her jewelry store. Pop stars Madonna, Britney Spears, and Miley Cyrus have dealt with several stalkers over the years, generally men who believe they are in a relationship with them. In April 2018, police arrested a masked man who had traveled over 1,000 miles to stalk singer Taylor Swift at her LA home. They found ammunition, a knife, rope, and gloves in his car. The Rejected Stalker. Since Rebecca Schaeffer's murder, the offense of stalking has been legislated in most Western countries and applies equally to private citizens. It was recognized that, although the law might be new, stalking had been occurring forever. One of the most shocking cases was that of Tatiana Tarasov. In 1968, long before stalking laws existed, Tatiana befriended fellow student Prosenjit Podar and gave him a friendly kiss at a party. This led him to believe they were in a relationship, although Tatiana quickly clarified that she was not interested in romance. He developed an unhealthy obsession with her and stalked her for over a year before stabbing her to death in 1969. Prosenjit had openly expressed his intention to kill Tatiana to the school psychologist, who did not take him seriously. Tatiana's murder led to a Supreme Court case which ruled that mental health professionals have a duty to forego confidentiality and warn individuals who are threatened by patients. But stalking laws didn't come into place for another 2 decades. Many stalking cases involve breakups in which former partners cannot let go of a failed relationship. Stalking often goes hand in hand with domestic violence. The murder of a usually female partner by a usually male former spouse is often preceded by a period of stalking, sometimes for years. Apprehended violence orders rarely act as a deterrent. A reporter for the Washington Post wrote a heart-wrenching first-hand account of his daughter, Kristen Lardner, being stalked and terrorized by her ex-boyfriend in 1992. He shot Kristen in the head and face, despite a court ordering him to stay away from her. All the signs were there, and as her father wrote, "This was a crime that could and should have been prevented. I write about it as a sort of cautionary tale, in anger at a system of justice that failed to protect my daughter, a system that is addicted to looking the other way, especially at the evil done to women." Stalking laws are unique in that, rather than focusing on the perpetrator's intent, they focus on the experience of the victim. It could even be said that stalking is in the eye of the victim. Often the stalker and the object of their attention will perceive the same behavior in very different ways. A rejected suitor, for example, might see repeated phone calls and multiple attempts to approach to their victim as an indicator of how important that person is to them and how enthusiastic they are for a relationship. Stalking is generally defined in legislation as repeated and unwanted intrusive behavior towards another person, which creates distress. It can include following a person, telephoning them persistently, driving by their house constantly, obsessively checking and commenting on their social media, sending them unwanted messages, correspondence, or gifts, or peppering them with overly intrusive or inappropriately personal questions designed to elicit information. A stalker will often proudly reveal knowledge they have about their victim that they have obtained through enquiries or surveillance. In one case, a stalker found out where a pop star lived by zooming in on a reflection in her eye on an Instagram post. To the stalker, this might be showing how resourceful they are and how far they are willing to go to get closer to the object of their affection. To the victim, it can be a terrifying breach of privacy. When it turns nasty, stalkers may begin using emotional blackmail, such as threats of suicide, contacting or making threats toward the victim's family members, colleagues, or friends, stealing or destroying personal property, hacking into electronic devices, or violence that could escalate to homicide. Another way stalkers inflict terror is through public defamation. Once it may have taken place through graffiti on a bathroom wall, for a good time call, but now it is more likely to take place via social media posts or revenge porn, such as the man who was recently jailed after posting a woman's intimate photos on porn sites and providing her address, telling viewers to go there for sex. Incompetent suitors and intimacy seekers. It's not always obvious who might be a stalker. Some of the most common types of stalkers are those known as incompetent suitors or intimacy seekers, as defined in the book Stalkers and Their Victims. Incompetent suitors, as their name implies, are seeking to establish a relationship with another person, but are impaired in their social skills, and especially their courting skills. Although they are usually men, incompetent suitors can also be female, and they can target men as well as women. What drives them is their need for a relationship. Intimacy-seeking stalkers are usually attempting to establish or assert a loving relationship with someone who does not feel the same way. They are driven by their fantasy of love and quest for fulfillment. This is the only type of stalking where women predominate as perpetrators, and celebrities are often, but not always, the object of their unwanted attentions. There may be some overlap with erotomania, where the stalker believes a relationship exists that is all in the stalker's mind. Margaret Mary Ray stalked U.S. talk show host David Letterman for years, until she killed herself in 1998. Ray believed that she was Letterman's wife and that her son was their child. Canadian actress Geneviève Sabourin stalked Alex Baldwin, bombarding him with emails and insisting that they were involved in a romantic relationship, until eventually in 2013 she was sentenced to 7 months in jail. The perpetrator in the second story of this book, Richard Britton, is a cross between the incompetent suitor and the intimacy seeker. According to Stalkers and Their Victims, these two types of stalker share a sense of entitlement. They share a self-centered approach which invests their needs with absolute primacy, and they share a blindness to the real wishes of the person unfortunate enough to have attracted their attention. Richard had the lack of social skills and awareness typical of the incompetent suitor, failing to abide by basic acceptable courting rules. Although of high intelligence, he had lifelong problems interacting with others. Although part incompetent suitor, Richard's behavior also falls into the more problematic category of intimacy seeker. This type of stalker is distinguished by having unrealistically positive views of themselves. They become obsessed with the fantasy world they have created about the object of their attention. Even when a victim rejects his advances, the intimacy seeker feels a sense of compulsion to continue, even while intellectually admitting that she does not seem to want what he wants. The result was a terrifying ordeal for a young woman whose only crime was a charming smile. Cyberstalking. The invention of the Internet led to another form of harassment that also attracts considerable media attention: cyberstalking. Cyberstalking relies on the access and anonymity provided by modern technology, and is something that young people are especially prone to, such as the case of Mark and John, the third in this book. Of course, any stalker can use online communications to carry out their stalking activities, but a particularly chilling form of cyberstalking is catfishing, where the stalker lures their victim into a relationship by means of a fictional online persona. Catfishing is usually carried out as part of a romance scam in order to extract money out of lonely hearts by requesting ever-increasing amounts of money to pay for airline tickets or other expenses in order for the couple to be united. Older people are particularly susceptible to this kind of scam, but children and teens can also fall victim, believing they are communicating with someone the same age as them, when in reality they are talking to predators. The stalker's motivation in this case may be to eventually meet up with the child, or they may convince the youngster to send them nude photos, which they then used to blackmail the child into providing more pornographic and extreme photos and videos for distribution around their networks. This can have tragic consequences. In 2013, 17-year-old Daniel Perry was lured into sharing compromising Skype messages and then threatened unless he paid up. Similarly, 17-year-old Ronan Hughes was tricked into sending explicit pictures online before being blackmailed for money. Both teenagers took their own lives due to the humiliation and fear of being exposed. In another case, 14-year-old Breck Bednar was lured to meet someone he had met gaming. The two had built up a friendship over a long period. The police responded to a call at the friend's house to find Breck wrapped with duct tape, his neck slashed. He had been raped and murdered. Children and teens today are taught from an early age that people may not be who they seem to be online, but they can still fall prey to a good story. Predators often use the identities of popular musicians and celebrities to lure young people into online conversations with tales that make the recipient feel special. The case of Mark and John happened in the early days of online chat rooms, before such knowledge was commonplace. This extraordinary and unbelievable tale must be understood in light of those earlier times. Resentful Stalkers. The final story in this book is perhaps the most chilling of all. While stalking usually arises out of a twisted concept of love or a pathological fixation where one person is seeking to establish or impose a relationship on another person who doesn't hold the same feelings, sometimes it is about retaliation for a perceived injustice. The resentful stalker sees themselves as a victim of injustice or humiliation and is motivated by a desire for retribution and sustained by the satisfaction of engendering terror in their target. Craigslist rape fantasy is an example of cyberstalking by a resentful stalker that has a shocking twist. At the core of the case are two of the most powerful criminal motivators: jealousy and money. This book in no way covers the gamut of stalking behaviors. Rather, it is intended as an in-depth look at 4 stalking cases that made headlines due to the shocking and often bizarre circumstances that surrounded them. Part 1. Rebecca Schaeffer. In the late 1980s, the term stalking came to be used by the media to describe the behavior of the unwanted followers of the famous. Initially, it was the paparazzi to whom the label was applied, only later being attached to disordered fans. Mullen et al. Stalkers and Their Victims, 2009. 1. Rebecca Gets a Job. In 1986, Rebecca Schaeffer landed a job that most 18-year-olds could only dream about. Beating thousands of Hollywood hopefuls, the young actress was offered the part of Patty Russell in a new sitcom called My Sister Sam, which was to air weekly on the CBS television network. With her infectious energy and shock of unruly curls, Rebecca certainly looked the part of the flighty teen, and she could easily pass for a 16-year-old. However, the resemblance to her character stopped there. Unlike the flaky, impulsive Patty, Rebecca was serious, hard-working, and ambitious. To the outside world, she was a complete unknown who had been thrust into sudden stardom, but although she was barely legally an adult, she had already packed a lot into her charmed life. Born on November 6, 1967, Rebecca Lucille Schaeffer was a much-loved only child. Her father, Benson, was a child psychologist, and her mother, Dana, was a writer and teacher. Rebecca spent her comfortable and privileged childhood in Eugene, Oregon, where she wanted for nothing. Her childhood was filled with horses, books, the outdoors, and the love of her besotted parents. When Rebecca was 13, the family moved 100 miles north to Laurelhurst, an affluent suburb of vintage homes and winding tree-lined streets in Portland, Oregon. There, Rebecca enrolled in the elite Lincoln High School, the same school that The Simpsons creator Matt Groening had attended a decade earlier. She excelled at her studies and was accepted into the Talented and Gifted program. She was also effortlessly popular, which saw her elected a student officer. She wrote poetry, rode horses, and was deeply committed to her Jewish faith, even flirting with the idea of becoming a rabbi. If Rebecca went through a typical awkward preteen phase, it was very short-lived. By the time she turned 14, she had blossomed into a vivacious beauty. Hers were the kind of looks that everyone commented on, beautiful yet accessible in a wholesome girl-next-door way. She was also sweet, unspoiled, and a little bit serious. She strove to do well at school, hoping to become a doctor or a lawyer, either of which would make her parents proud. It was a chance conversation with her hometown hairdresser, who tended to her thick mop of dark curls, that made her reconsider her career options. Seeing the potential in Rebecca's perfect features, the hairdresser set up a meeting for her with another of his clients, local talent agent Nanette Troutman. Nanette wasted no time signing her up, and Rebecca Schaefer's sweet smile soon radiated from department store catalogs and TV commercials, convincing parents to spend up big on back-to-school outfits and items. Although she had taken part in the occasional school play, Rebecca hadn't ever given serious consideration to a career in acting, but Nanette found her work on local TV shows. Suddenly, a whole new world opened up, and the idea of becoming a doctor, lawyer, or rabbi lost its allure when compared to the glamorous world of modeling and performing. In 1984, Rebecca landed a summer internship at Elite Model Management, which meant traveling to the other side of the country to spend 3 months in New York City. Most 16-year-olds would be overwhelmed by the behemoth city, with its reputation for being fast, unfriendly, and cutthroat. But Rebecca wasn't most girls. Her motto was always, "Choose adventure over regret." She welcomed all the challenges the Big Apple threw at her, and soon felt at home. So at home, in fact, that when her internship finished, she decided she wanted to stay and see if she could make a living as a model. Rebecca's parents were aghast at the idea, despite her promising she would see out her final year of high school at an academy for aspiring actors while she was working. New York was a long way from Oregon, both in physical distance and lifestyle. Rebecca made impassioned pleas and wore her parents down with sound arguments. She was supported by the modeling agency, who wanted the dazzling young Rebecca on their books. Dana and Benson had to admit their daughter had inherited their own adventurous spirits and the risk-taking attitude that had seen her father put his career as a successful child psychologist on hold to study Yiddish theater in New York many years before. Despite their misgivings and not wanting to stand in the way of her dreams, the Schaefers relented and gave her their blessing. By August 1984, Rebecca was sharing a 2-bedroom apartment in Manhattan with 5 other models, all hoping for their big break. She called her parents regularly to let them know how she was doing and regale them with tales of the big city. In an effort to show them she could look after herself, she told them about intervening in some troubling behavior she witnessed on the subway by a young man armed with a screwdriver who appeared to be terrorizing a young woman. Rebecca pretended that she was friends with the woman, marching up to her and saying, "Hi, it's nice to see you. Come on, let's go get coffee." She took her by the hand and pulled her up the stairs. Hearing this story...
Sample complete. Ready to continue?